Rick Dollar here for the Rick Dollar Show. And if you can't get us on our 30 affiliates across the U.S. and Canada, check us out on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and anywhere else you can see my ugly mug, But today, my guest is Mr. Daryl Mosley. Daryl, what's up, brother?
Man, Rick, hey, I'm good. How about yourself?
Yeah, I got plenty of coffee in my body. I'm good to go.
I hear you. I can't hardly drink coffee. It'll keep me up all day.
I'm telling you, I know. Sometimes I have to have that though, so I can
That's right.
remember everything I've got to do. Well, let me tell you something. I've been listening to this long days and short stories record, and I'm liking this thing.
And I appreciate that.
Especially this me and Mr. Howard. I'll put it this way: you are the consummate storyteller. There's no doubt about that.
Well, I appreciate that. I've always loved story songs, and
oh yeah,
so all of my albums have included a lot of those. But on each album that I have done, I've tried to include one song that I wrote specifically about the little town I grew up in. I grew up in Waverly, Tennessee. And still live here, and so there's been stories that I've been able to pull, but this one was a little different because this is also kind of a history thing. Back in the late 1800s, Jesse James and the Younger brothers tried to rob a bank up in Minnesota, and things did not go well, and to say the least. Well, and so in order to lay low for a while, the James boys moved to Tennessee. Frank ended up in Nashville, but Jesse and his wife Z moved to Waverly and lived here for a couple of years.
Wow.
Under the alias of Mr. and Mrs. J.D. Howard. And, they rented a farm and they had parties and socials and went to church. And there was some whispers about who people thought they were, or heard that they were. There were rumors, but, he was pretty law abiding while he was here. And so they were kind of local celebrities, and they left him alone. After a couple of years, they just ended up moving back to Missouri. But the whole song is written from the perspective of a Mr. Link, who was a store owner that had provided some credit for Jesse when he first showed up, and then beyond that, the whole story is as historically accurate as I can write it.
Oh, I think you got it right on the nose, man. I mean, I had no idea that that's who this song was written about, though.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. He built a racehorse track behind his barn, and they used to have just for fun racehorses, and he had a sorrel named Red Fox that could not be beat. Mm-hmm. Well, no wonder. I mean, I would assume if you're an outlaw in the 1800s, having a really fast horse probably kind of important. And, and he was just honestly, it was probably just keeping him trained, keeping him worked up.
Yeah,
and because he never knew when he was going to have to flee. So it's an interesting story. It would make a great movie. It's just never been made so far.
Wow. Well, we need to talk to somebody about that, man.
That's right.
Yeah, I just want one half. Okay.
Absolutely.
Oh man. Now this other song that I was listening to was Everyday Blessings. Now that's on Blue Collar Gospel from Billy Blue Records, I guess. And you had a little help on there from Miss J. Lee Roberts. And let me tell you something. She can compliment anything that she does. It's amazing to me about that girl and her voice, but the soul that she puts into every song that she does.
Yeah, Jaylee's she's unique. I mean, her dad has been one of my best friends for over 30 years.
Wow.
And so I knew Jaylee from the time she was born. and watched her grow up. But her parents are wonderful people, but they come from a long line of professional music and country music and bluegrass music. And so Jaylee literally grew up in it and grew up around the music and the people. And so she's in touch with it in a way that most young people her age are not, just from that experience of growing up around it. So yeah, the soul in her voice far surpasses the age that she is. And I think that's why, because from the time that she was 10, 11, I've seen pictures of her with Connie Smith and with, this artist and that artist and people that she genuinely listens to and admires. And, she's not one that's going to be listening to the new pop, album. She's going to be digging out a Keith Whitley album. That's just who she is. And so she's been singing harmony on my album since the very beginning,
Wow.
bringing her to sing harmony. Well, Rick Lang is a songwriter up in the Northeast, and Rick and I write lots of songs together. Rick's not really an artist, but he puts out an album every now and then where songs he has written or co-written and brings in artists to sing on it. And
Mm-hmm.
he and I had written Everyday Blessings, and so he had me and Jaylee come in and sing on it, and it turned out great. It was a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, great song. I mean, I was just flabbergasted how you guys work so well together. But that was before I knew that you'd worked together for, you know, eons, I guess it
Yeah,
seems like.
yeah, that's always one of the great things about being in the business as long as I have is you really get to know people and get to
Mm-hmm.
know them on a personal level, and so it becomes more than just coworkers. It really is kind of a family atmosphere, and so uh, there's just a connection that way that I think in a subconscious way spills over into the music. People don't realize they're hearing it, but it's there.
Yeah. Now, how long have you been doing this, sir?
Man, professionally over 30 years. The first touring job I
Gosh.
took was in the late 1980s. Actually, Danny Roberts, Jaylee's dad, and I were in a band called New Tradition back
Mm-hmm.
in the 80s. And all through the 90s, we were doing 200 dates a year, and we were doing all the TNN shows, and back when TNN was a thing, and, the Opry and all of that. And but then I ended up leaving the band at the end of the 90s, mostly because I had 3 young kids that were growing up and we were on the road so much. And
Oh yeah.
I ended up taking a job with the Osborne brothers. And so I got a chance to mostly play the Opry for about 10, 11 years, some road dates, but not as many. So I could be home a little more. And then once they got grown, went back out on the road, which is where I've been ever since.
Yeah. That's not a bad little segue into the Osborne brothers there. I mean, that's
Yeah. Yeah. They were fun. I miss, it's hard to believe I'm living in a world that doesn't include them anymore because
gosh, I know, man.
even after Sonny retired midway through my tenure with them, and so I stayed with Bobby and but even after they I was not a part of either group. I would still text or call, especially Sonny. Sonny was always great to reach out to and get just to get advice or just to run
Oh
something by him,
yeah.
and he was very fatherly to me, and so they were really really good people to me.
Yeah. I mean, I had the opportunity one time to interview Bobby and had just 100 questions that I could ask this man because what do you do? I mean, you sit down in front of Bobby Osborne and all of a sudden your brain goes blank. you know?
And Bobby was one of the most gracious artists I've ever been around. I mean,
Oh
he
yeah.
never refused an autograph or a picture. He'd stand there all night long if that's what people wanted,
Mm-hmm.
and just a true gentleman.
Oh
And
yeah.
his son, Bobby Osborne Jr., we call him Bodge. Bodge is a friend, and he's doing well, still playing music, and just a good family. But having the years I had with them to get a chance to sit on the bus and hear the stories and kind of be mentored in a way that I hadn't been before. And all the years in New Tradition, none of us had ever played with anybody else, and
Yeah.
we'd never tenured in somebody else's band and learned how the road works. So I was kind of getting it late, riding with Bobby and Sonny, but it was well worth it.
Man, I'll just have to go back to this interview that I did with Bobby. It was at the Paramount Center for the Arts in Bristol. And I
Sure.
was living in Bristol at the time. And so I wanted to just try to get under his skin a little bit, kind of get him fired up. So, he was telling me where he was working in Kentucky and everything. And I said, so what do you think about all this new music, how people are doing things and how music's changing? And he said, I don't like it. And he turned his head this way. And I went, I've pissed off Bobby Osborne. This is not what you want to be known for.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
so, and I said, well, the only thing that came to mind, which was, don't stick your foot in your mouth, Rick. But I did it anyway. And I wasn't even thinking about it. I said, well, when you and Sonny came about, you weren't exactly dyed in the wool Pointer brand overall wearing guys. You
Right.
guys did it the way you wanted to do it. And he turned back around and he said, you're right. And I thought, holy crap, how did I fix
I
that?
made a point.
Yeah, exactly. But, it kind of brought something to my mind about this gentleman that had been such an icon in this type of music.
Yeah.
I,
You know,
I would have never thought that he would have agreed with me,
yeah, or maybe I
you
guess he
know?
had never thought about it that way because it's right. They
Yeah.
used to talk about, when they were doing package shows, they had signed with MCA Records, and he said, we'd be on the same show with Conway Twitty and Loretta Lynn, and they've got these
Hmm.
bands and all these electric instruments. And he said, then you got, me and Bobby and Dale Sled around a microphone, and he said, you just couldn't hear us. And you'll love this story. Bobby told me this one time. He said right after they had gone electric. They'd put pickups in all the instruments, and Bobby was playing the Opry one night, and
Right.
Monroe, with Bill Monroe still there. And Bobby said he had told the stagehand just to put a 1/4-inch cable right over the microphone stand. So he walks out there and he just kind of discreetly pops that, cord in the mandolin. And he said they started. He said I chopped down one time and it just blew the back wall of the diamond out. It was just so loud. And he said we finished our song, and he said we were coming off stage and Monroe caught him, and he said, "What kind of mandolin you got there?" And he said, "Well, Bill, it's just like yours." Bill said, "No, sir, I ain't got a mandolin that'll do that."
Let me tell you, I can only imagine there's probably a million of those stories, and probably some that we can't even tell right now.
Oh
But,
yeah.
it's just seeing these guys, I'm sure, made you look at things a little differently. And it, kind of there was some growth there too, I'm sure, just being
Oh
around
yeah.
these guys.
No question. And
Yeah.
and a respect that just when you realize what they were up against and what they came through. And
Hmm.
that was always, I mean, I loved playing the Opry, and I still do, but the greatest gift that I ever got was all those years sitting in the dressing room and
Hmm.
listening to Earl Scruggs or Little Jimmy Dickens or whoever, just sitting in there telling
Gosh.
stories. And and they're just talking about the old days, like anybody does. It's just that their old days included all the legends in country and bluegrass music, and
Hmm.
funny stories and different things. And I remember a lot of them. I wish I remembered all of them, because that was the my favorite stuff, was just hearing those stories and literally never knowing who was going to walk in next.
Right. I can imagine. And then if Jimmy walked in, in front of you, you wouldn't have to stand up to look over him.
That's true.
Oh, that's a joke.
Now, it's funny. Little Jimmy was always chronically early. He was always the first one
Was
there,
he
and
really?
I tend to always be early too. And so there was lots of nights at the Opry that he and I were the first ones there, and we'd sit in his dressing room and tell stories and look at pictures, and talked about Hank Williams and Minnie Pearl, and he'd tell
Wow.
these stories, and it's just priceless to me. I wouldn't trade that for any amount of money.
I can imagine. Dude, you've done it all. You've been everywhere, just about.
And I have been really, really blessed. Growing up, I never really wanted to do anything else. From the time I was a kid, this was my dream. And to still at this stage, after 30 plus years, to still be on the road and still making records and still being able to do it, it's I'm just so blessed.
Well, there's a demand for people like Daryl Mosley out there, I think, because there's music is morphing into something different. I mean, we can see it with a lot of the newer artists, and some people have called it jam grass. I feel like that it's all kind of mixing together now, and the lines are blurred. Uh, or am I just out in left field?
No, I agree
No.
with you, and I think a part of that is because there are young artists,
Hmm.
like the Billy Strings, that are playing auditoriums for young audiences,
Hmm.
and they're still playing Flat and Scruggs songs. I mean,
I
it's
know.
really traditional. It's not like n- not in. I don't mean this in a disparaging way. It's not like
Mhm.
Newgrass Revival was, because I love those
Right.
guys, and I love their music. But man, Billy Strings will get out there and just play bluegrass, and I think a lot of these young people don't realize that's what they're hearing, because he's also playing a lot of these eclectic festivals and that sort of thing with different types
Yeah.
of music, and so yeah, there's an exposure, and I think because of that, it causes all of these fans from different genres to kind of pull together more. And I think that's really good for all the music.
And me too. Just about anybody that I talk to. I mean, from iconic people like you to whoever, these guys are telling me the same thing. And they're all mentioning that same person.
Yeah.
That's filling up these arenas. And I think it's good for the whole potato. I mean, I think it's good for me. It's good for you. It's good for every artist out there because, Flat and Scruggs did a lot of college shows, when they were playing.
Yeah.
And I think that those guys, kind of planted the seed a little bit for a lot of guys like Billy Strings.
I just think that anybody who's a music fan, what they're looking for, whether they realize it or not, is authenticity in the music.
That's right.
And that's the reason why that a lot of rap and hip hop is coming from urban areas because it's part of their culture.
Exactly.
I'm not saying that some kids that were born and raised in some small town Mississippi couldn't do it. But I just think there's a level of culture that finds its way into that. And so if when you've got an artist or artists that can take that music into different areas, then it kind of starts becoming a little bit a part of that culture. And so the next generation is more authentically pulling from those influences. And I just think that's good for growth. I would love to think that there's a music fan that showed up at a festival to see some band I've never even heard of, and they see Billy Strings and okay, let me check this guy out. So then, and that leads them down the rabbit hole of this band, and that leads them down, and then we end up listening to the same music. That's how
exactly
that's what happens. Yeah.
It is so true. I mean, there's some guys out there that I've been listening to probably for about a year now, maybe a little bit longer. Mountain Grass Unit.
Sure.
And these cats are they're doing their own thing. You're right. They're sliding down that left-hand lane, man, but they're doing exactly what a lot of guys like Flat and Scruggs did years ago.
Yeah, and I think it's an authenticity factor.
Mm-hmm.
Monroe and Flat and Scruggs, they sang about farming and working hard and struggling and church and stuff because that was their roots. And
right.
I was listening to the earlier day to Tyler Childers.
Oh yeah.
Tyler's from Kentucky. And you can hear it in everything he sings and the lyrics in his songs. And, so I know this is a guy that knows what he's talking about. And that's important to me. If I'm going to listen to somebody, tell me about, it's like, if you're going to have to tell me in your song how country you are, I'm pretty sure you're not. You don't have to convince me that. I'll be able to hear it. And I think that's true in any style of music. I just think it's the best of it comes from a place from within.
I wish I could remember. Somebody turned me on to Tyler Childers, but it has been years ago. I mean, I'm talking probably 10 years, maybe 12 years ago. And he had a Red Barn record that's out. And man, that dude just showed. Yeah, you're exactly right, man. He was telling me exactly where he was from and what goes on there and how things are supposed to be in Kentucky. And
I get that. When I was a kid, the very first album that I ever remember buying was Billy Joel's 52nd Street.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here I am, this kid in a small town in Tennessee, and I'm listening to this guy talking about growing up in New York or New Jersey.
That's right.
And so the cultures were very different, but some of the experiences were the same. And so I could relate in a way to some of the things he was singing about, even though culturally we were different, which is why it became really important to me when I started writing songs that my songs are based on what it's really like and not the stereotypes and not to water it down or make it sound harder or easier than it was, but to try to really express what it's really like. Because maybe somewhere out there in New York or New Jersey is somebody listening to my music who's never traveled out of the area. And all they're going to know about living in the country is probably what they've seen on television. Well, television's not been real good to us country people.
Not really.
Like the Beverly Hillbillies and the Dukes of Hazzard, and that's what they think. So it's important for me to add an authentic level to that music, and hopefully they will get that in the same way that I did.
Yeah. 52nd Street. Man, you just went back. I was very young when I had that vinyl record. I
Me
can't
too.
remember how I got it. No, yeah, I do. We used to go in the grocery store. Now, this is weird, but this is how it worked where I lived. I lived in Bristol. And at the end of the grocery store line, there was a record, kind of a little record display. So there was Billy Joel. I remember I bought my first Kiss record there because I was like, what are these crazy looking guys?
Right.
And my next door neighbor said, hey, you need to get that record. It's great. And I listened to that, Bob Seger,
Yeah.
and the Silver Bullet Band. I mean, all that stuff I got right there as my mom was going through the grocery line
Yeah.
because I was always wanting to be right there. I thought, man, wonder what I can talk her into today. But
God.
that 52nd Street record, dude, it's still in my head. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember that song like it was yesterday.
Well, that's what's funny is, of course, we're so spoiled now because you can pull up tracks of any album, and so
Oh, yeah.
it's easier to chase it down. And back in our day, all we had was the singles that radio was playing. So we knew My
Mm-hmm.
Life and Big Shot, you know, but until I got that album, of course, there was no way to hear all the album tracks. And
Yeah.
to this day, it's the album tracks on that album that are most precious to me. It's Zanzibar and Rosalinda's Eyes and Half a Mile
Oh,
Away. And I remember all of those songs, and that's been 40 plus years ago, close to 50
gosh.
years ago. And I still remember them. And I remember what it felt like when I heard them.
You're
You
telling
know,
your age, man.
yeah, well, that's all right.
Now you're
I've earned it. I've
you're,
earned it.
you're telling mine too.
But I think that's what we hold on to
Yeah.
is what it felt like when we heard those songs.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's important to me, that I would love to know that I'm leaving music that when people hear it later on, it will take them to a moment, that it'll remind them of what it felt like at that time in their life. So to be a little part of the soundtrack of people's lives, that's pretty cool.
But do you think that the music that we have today, not necessarily just bluegrass or Americana or whatever, do you think we're still going to be able to leave those marks, or they're going to be able to leave those marks, or is it just going to be a few of those people?
I think the marks will still be left in everybody's individual life. I think the difference is now there's so many artists that have a platform, big or
Mm-hmm.
small, in a way that they didn't used to. I mean, used to, if it wasn't on in the top 40,
Mm-hmm.
released by a major label, being played on the radio, because so all of us, we share the same music.
Mm-hmm.
We share those same memories, and so now there's young people out there that's pulling songs from artists that they discovered on YouTube or TikTok or whatever, that maybe these are not mainstream artists yet, but
Mm-hmm.
it's still having that same effect in their life. So I don't think we will ever again share so much of the same music. I think music's still doing the same job.
Well, Dick Clark, man, that dude could do it. And then Casey Kasem came along, and they did these top 40 shows every week, and you were thinking, man, I can't wait to listen to the radio to hear what's number one this week.
Right.
And it's just kind of strange. It's just not there anymore.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is that if people who are of the same age,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, we shared all those songs.
Yeah.
Those were that was the music of our generation,
Yeah.
and I just don't think it's that way anymore, because music is so much more readily available. And like I said, artists have platforms that they didn't used to have. You don't have to necessarily go the mainstream media route.
Mm-hmm.
I look at an artist like Tyler Childers, and Tyler is not getting lots of mainstream radio airplay,
No, he's
but it's not
not.
hurting the fact that he's selling out everywhere he plays.
Gosh, man, no doubt about
And
that.
so yeah, so that, to me, that's a good thing, and that
Oh,
allows for
yeah.
artists to express themselves, and people to find music that they relate to in a way that we couldn't.
Well,
We still had Bob Seger, and we still had the Kiss, and
that's right, man.
so I think I don't feel like we missed out, but I often wonder
Oh, no.
how different our lives would have been if we'd had access to everything musically, like the young people
Gosh,
today do.
man, it's just crazy how people can just, pull that music into their daily life now
Yeah.
very easily. very easily. I catch myself some days, man, just walking around with my headphones on in the house thinking, man, I remember this record. It was so good, you know. I remember that song from Kiss, what that Peter Criss did, Beth. That was
Yeah.
their biggest record, their biggest song ever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Well, you
I
don't
mean,
think about them being a ballad band, but
no, but man,
ballad.
they pulled it off. Let me
Yeah.
tell you. I don't know how, but you know, I think it just the way the dude wrote the song, it was just it was unreal. But
It's been good though. I've been able to learn about new artists through my children, people that they
mm-hmm.
have discovered. And at the same time, I have introduced them to artists that they wouldn't have listened to otherwise. And so that's got doors kind of swinging both ways. So
Yeah, I think that's a good thing, man. So the way songs were structured a long time ago and how they're structured now, is there a huge difference in that, or is it basically, you know, this is a way that this song should be structured?
I think a lot of it depends on what they're trying to accomplish. In bluegrass, it's structurally that's fairly similar.
Mm-hmm.
In country music, it's changed quite a lot. They,
Oh
used
yeah.
to country writers would get together and co-write, or they'd write alone. Now it's very different. Now there
Mm-hmm.
may be five people involved in a song, and they've got a track person and a vibe person, and it sounds far more
Mm-hmm.
complicated than it seems to me like it ought to be. But I don't. It's not the world that I live in, so I'm not going to judge it.
Exactly.
But it's just very different from how we used to do it.
Well, I mean, if you look at people like, you know, Chris Stapleton started heavy duty, you know, the steel drivers. He was majorly big in bluegrass because that's where he came from.
Yeah,
And now look at him. He's just a giant in the country industry. You
yeah,
know, when you get guys like Morgan Wallen and Hardy and you know, Laney Wilson, all these people that are such, you know, big people in the country industry right now. You know, if Chris Stapleton called up, hey, you want to write a song with me? I'm sure they would be like, you know, all over themselves just trying
right.
to schedule the time. You know
Oh,
what
I
I'm
think I
saying?
can squeeze that in. Yeah.
Yeah,
The thing about Stapleton is that he's still writing with guys like Jerry Salley and
I
Ronnie
know.
Bowman,
I know.
guys that are bluegrassers. So he's still doing that, because that's the world he came out of. And so
I know, man.
I think we've gotten past the thing where we're manufacturing artists. And
Right.
Nashville was bad about that at one time,
Oh, they
taking
were.
somebody's like, okay, you fit the suit, you're handsome enough. So we're going to make a star out of you. And I think we're kind of over that. And that's what Morgan Wallen is another great example of a guy who's
Yeah.
has largely in lots of ways kind of been ignored by some of the mainstream elements in Nashville, but he's a monster artist. And
Oh my
but
gosh.
he's sing when he has things like Percy Priest and things in his song that you'd have to know Tennessee to know what he's talking about. So
Exactly.
again, the authenticity carries into his music, and I think that matters.
God, it does, doesn't it? I was just
Yeah.
listening to some of his stuff this morning. You know, it's just crazy. I mean, because he can fit just about any artist in there with him,
Yeah.
and it's a monster hit.
Yeah,
It's
the songs are
just
really good
crazy.
from a craft standpoint. He has really really good songs.
He does.
One of the things I love about Cody Johnson is that
Yeah,
Cody sings about Texas and being a cowboy because God, he was Texas. He was a cowboy.
that's
It's
right.
the world he came from, and that's why that matters to me far more than somebody telling me what a cowboy they were, and then you find out that it's just a song. It doesn't mean anything.
He don't even drive a truck, man.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, cowboy hat in my Prius.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm waiting on a couple of those guys to just, you know, get found out, you know. But you know, country and you talking about Jerry Salley, man. I'll tell you a little short story. I called Jerry one day. I kept trying to get a hold of Jerry, and I kept getting hung up, almost like I was getting hung up on, you know. And I thought, why is he doing this? You know, because we're friends. And I'm like, he answered the phone. I was like, hey, what's going on? And he was kept like he was wanting to get off the phone for some reason. And I know where he lives in Gatlinburg Pigeon Forge area. I'm not going to tell anybody where he lives,
Yeah,
but anyway, he was there, and it's kind of a secluded area.
right.
And the thing was, he kept trying to get off the phone, like I said, and it was kind of, I don't know. I couldn't figure that out. I was like, what's going on? And then I heard somebody ask for a bottle of water. And I said, you got Stapleton at your house, don't you? He said, starts like a little bit of a giggle, not really a giggle, but he's like, yeah. I was like, okay, I'll leave you alone.
This is obviously a bad time.
Yeah, obviously. But they were writing a song. And I mean, you know, sometimes that's the way it worked out. I mean,
Yeah.
I've noticed lately, you know, on TikTok and other things, I've noticed that country artists and just regular mainstream artists are just headed that way because they can walk down the street there and nobody will bother them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad that we have not embraced, at least in the part of the world where I live in, the whole paparazzi thing.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
that people still have a little bit of a life. I know it's not easy when you're. I mean, obviously he's a megastar, and you know he's pretty identifiable. You know, it's not
Yeah,
like
if you see him walking down the street, you're like,
yeah,
oh no,
but
that's Stapleton.
yeah,
Just leave him alone.
I'm not sure who. Yeah, no, you're gonna know, but that's funny.
Somebody told me a story one time that when he was started writing songs in Nashville, his day job was like a not really like a janitor, but a guy that was over this entire building, and he had keys that he kept on his side, and they always knew when he would come into the office there to write songs. Um, they could hear these work boots and hear these keys jingling. And that's where he met his wife.
Really?
Yeah. And they always knew when he was coming in though. They hear the door shut and these noises.
Isn't that funny?
Crazy, isn't it?
That is crazy.
It is, man. Well, dude, it's been good talking to you. I hadn't talked to you in a bit, and good to know that things are still going well for you, and that you're still loving that sound of those tires on the interstate there.
Man, I am. I average about 5,000 miles a month on the road.
Dang.
I did just under 150 shows last year, and I probably will again this year. And you know, I've said more than once, you know, when the good Lord is ready to slow me down, I will be the first to know. You know, so as long as I'm healthy and still doing good, and people want to hear me sing, I'll keep doing it.
Yeah, the vehicle will be on the side of the road, and you'll be like, I ain't changing this tire.
That's right. Where's that AAA number?
Yeah, I'm calling this guy. Daryl Mosley, be good, brother. We appreciate you being on the Rick Dollar Show. And everybody, if you need to look for what's going on with Daryl Mosley, where can they look, Daryl?
Well, of course, the website, just darylmosley.com. If you do the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, I've got those as well. So
exactly,
chase me down on there, and you can stream the music wherever you get your music. I'm probably there.
Isn't that crazy? You're saying
Yeah.
that now. Stream your music, please.
Yes, exactly.
Used to be other things, but hey, whatever. Hey, Daryl, thanks, buddy. I appreciate you. And
good to see you, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
That'll do it.
All right. See you.